Picture yourself on a windswept hill in Greenland, where the cold air bites and the silence is broken only by the distant call of seabirds and the whisper of the wind. From this lonely vantage point, you overlook a vast fjord scattered with ancient icebergs, drifting slowly through frigid waters that have shaped this land for millennia. For 5 centuries, Norse settlers, Vikings, farmers, explorers called this harsh and unforgiving land home, carving out a life on the very edge of the known world. They built sturdy stone churches, raised families, and established outposts of European civilization, bringing their traditions and beliefs to a place few dared to settle. Then, almost without warning, they vanished. The last written record is a wedding in 1408, held in a lonely church. After that, the chronicles fall silent. When ships from Norway arrived years later, they found only empty farms and abandoned churches. The people who once thrived here were simply gone, leaving behind only questions. For centuries, their disappearance has remained a haunting mystery, echoing through the ruins and the icy winds. How could a society that survived so long in the Arctic, enduring brutal winters and isolation, simply disappear without a trace? Their story is both a lesson in survival and a warning about the cost of failing to adapt to a changing world as climate and fortune turned against them. The ruins whisper of a struggle lost, of a people who clung to tradition and identity even as the world shifted around them, unable or unwilling to change. This is the story of the Greenland Norse, a tale of resilience, pride, and the ultimate price of inflexibility in the face of overwhelming odds. What happened here is more than a historical puzzle. It's a human drama, a cautionary tale with lessons that still resonate for us all today. It began with Eric the Red, exiled from Iceland for his crimes, who sailed west into the unknown, driven by both necessity and a restless spirit of adventure. He discovered a land of green valleys and icy fjords, a place both beautiful and harsh, where the sea met the frozen wilderness. Eric called it Greenland, a clever name designed to lure settlers with the promise of fertile land and new beginnings. Hundreds answered his call, braving the treacherous North Atlantic, bringing livestock, tools, and their European way of life to this distant shore. They built 2 main settlements, raised cattle and sheep, and constructed sturdy turf longhouses to shelter themselves from the Arctic winds. Farming was their foundation, but the land demanded more. They hunted caribou and seals, learning to adapt to the rhythms of the Arctic. For over 2 centuries, their population grew, peaking at around 2,500 people, forming a vibrant community on the edge of the world. They built stone churches, traded with Europe for iron and luxury goods, and even had their own bishop, connecting them to the wider medieval world. Their success was a delicate balancing act, farming, hunting, and trade all working together, each one vital for survival in this remote land. But their existence depended on a fragile balance of climate and connection to the outside world, with every winter bringing new challenges. For a while, they thrived at the edge of the Arctic, carving out a life where few others dared to settle. Yet beneath the surface, their world was always on a knife's edge, threatened by shifting weather, isolation, and the limits of their resources. The climate, the land, and their traditions would soon be tested as colder seasons and poor harvests loomed on the horizon. The balance was about to break, and the Viking dream in Greenland would face its greatest challenge yet. The Norse thrived during the medieval warm period, when milder weather made farming possible. Longer summers meant more hay for livestock, and the seas were open for travel and hunting. But in the 13th century, the climate shifted. The Little Ice Age began, summers shortened, winters deepened, and growing hay became nearly impossible. Sea ice choked the fjords, isolating the settlements. Each year, the struggle grew harder. Less hay, longer winters, more uncertainty. Their European-style farming, already marginal, began to fail. The dream of a green land was slowly buried in ice. The psychological toll was immense. Each generation worked harder for less. The stories of a fertile Greenland became distant myths. They were trapped, fighting a losing battle against the cold. The climate was no longer an ally, but an implacable enemy. Their way of life was under siege. For the Norse settlers in Greenland, grass was more than just a plant. It was the foundation of their entire way of life, the thread that held their society together. Their cattle and sheep depended on hay to survive the long, brutal winters when snow covered the ground and nothing fresh could grow. As the climate cooled and droughts became more frequent, hay harvests shrank year after year, leaving farmers desperate. Less grass meant fewer animals could be kept alive through the winter, and herds began to dwindle. Cattle bones disappeared from trash heaps, replaced by the remains of sheep, goats, and eventually seals as desperation grew. The Norse were forced to slaughter livestock they could no longer feed, a heartbreaking decision for any farmer. This was more than just an economic loss. It was a blow to their identity, their traditions, and their nutrition. Dairy vanished from their diet, replaced by lean seal meat. This shift led to malnutrition, as their bodies struggled to adapt to the new, harsher diet. The domino effect was devastating. Weak animals meant less food, and less food meant weaker, more vulnerable people. Their culture was built on herding, on the rhythms of the land, but now the land could no longer support their way of life. The ground itself was failing them, turning from a source of hope to a symbol of loss. Every failed harvest was another step toward collapse, another blow to their dreams of survival. Their society, once defined by abundance and self-reliance, was now defined by scarcity and struggle. The Norse were being squeezed out by a land that no longer matched their traditions. The crisis was existential, and the future had never looked so uncertain. As farming failed, the Norse turned to the sea, relying on seal hunting for survival. Their diet shifted dramatically, from farmers who hunted to hunters who barely farmed. Seal hunting was dangerous and unfamiliar, requiring skills and tools they hadn't mastered. The ocean offered food, but at great risk and effort. This shift was a blow to their pride and social structure. Their identity was tied to the land, not the ice. Malnutrition and physical stress became common, as shown in their remains. They were caught between a lost agricultural past and a marine future they struggled to embrace. The transformation was reluctant and incomplete. They were working harder than ever, but getting less in return. The Norse were becoming something they never wanted to be. The strain was pushing their society to the breaking point. The Norse depended on trade with Europe, exporting walrus ivory in exchange for iron, timber, and grain. As sea ice worsened and new sources of ivory appeared, Greenland's ivory lost value. Trade collapsed. Norwegian ships stopped coming. The colony was cut off. No new tools, no timber, no outside support. Archaeology shows tools repaired to useless nubs, buildings crumbling for lack of wood. Their technology and culture began to decay in isolation. The economic lifeline was gone. The Norse were left to fend for themselves, adrift in a shrinking, icy world. Their connection to Europe, once their strength, became their weakness. Isolation was a death sentence. Their world was closing in. Even the land betrayed them. Isostatic rebound and rising seas flooded their best farms. Fertile coastal pastures became salt marshes. Hayfields drowned. Farmhouses and barns were threatened by flooding and erosion. Archaeological evidence shows abandoned farms now underwater or in tidal zones. Forced to move to higher, less fertile ground, their ability to support livestock shrank further. The land that once sustained them was disappearing. Their world was literally shrinking, one flooded field at a time. The Norse were losing ground on every front. While the Norse struggled, the Inuit thrived, perfectly adapted to the Arctic. The Norse saw their Inuit neighbors' superior tools and techniques. Kayaks, harpoons, warm clothing, but refused to adopt them. Cultural pride and a rigid European identity kept them from learning what could have saved them. To change would have meant admitting their own ways had failed. They chose to remain farmers, even as farming became impossible. Their refusal to adapt was their undoing. Survival demands flexibility, not just toughness. The Norse clung to tradition even as it led them to extinction. The end came quietly, no dramatic disaster, just a slow fade into silence. The last Norse may have died of hunger, disease, or tried to escape by sea. All that remains are ruins and bones, silent witnesses to their fate. Their story is a warning. Survival is about adaptation, not just endurance. The Norse were strong, but trapped by their own identity and traditions. They could not let go of being farmers in a land that demanded something else. When the world changed, they did not. Their fate is a graveyard of inflexibility. The wind through their ruins whispers a lesson: adapt or disappear. True survival means evolving, not just enduring. The Greenland Norse paid the ultimate price for refusing to change.